that's what I'm doing. Oh, yeah, recording. Yep, that's fine. So that's what I'm doing right now, but I think it is important for me to kind of share how I got there. So you can see on this slide, these are some of the sort of places I've been along my journey, and I'm kind of speak to like each step, so you guys can kind of not just see the end result of me working as like a full-time deep learning engineer, but also sort of the chaos all along the way. Start off, I was a community college student back in 2012. I graduated high school with a like 2.7 GPA. I've never really had any intentions of going to college, but I figured like, hey, let's give it a shot. So I enrolled in the community college that was local to me, College of DuPage. That's in one of the suburbs of Chicago, if any of y'all are familiar. I started off thinking I was going to do civil engineering. In my high school physics class, we had a project where we had to make like these little like balsa wood bridges. I don't know if any of you guys had to do something similar in high school, but I kind of liked that. So I'm like, hey, that's kind of like civil engineering. So I started off with that, and then I got very distracted and switched to mechanical engineering, switched to electrical engineering, and finally ended up with computer engineering, where I ended up getting my degree. After I finished 2 years at College of DuPage, I transferred to a local state university, University of Illinois at Chicago, to finish off my bachelor's. Not the most direct path to where I ended up, but I learned a lot along the way. And in my personal experience, since having left college, having this sort of knowledge off the beaten path has been very helpful. And I think maybe you guys will see why that is as I continue my story. So after I left undergrad, I spent a summer with this organization called Engineering World Health. They have a lot of university chapters where sort of engineering students can work on sort of medical devices for like low resource communities in developing countries. They also run a summer program where engineering students can basically in residency work on medical device repair, learn about the needs of hospitals in developing countries and low resource communities, to get that hands-on experience and try to make an impact. So I spent my summer in Rwanda in sort of Central/East Africa. It's directly east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So I spent summer there learning local language, Rwandan, as well as French. And while I set out with the desire to make like a meaningful change, I realized that change doesn't happen overnight. I spent 3 months there, and being honest, I felt like I didn't make any lasting impact. The lasting impact was on myself, and learning that, as I quote here, meaningful change happens on the scale of years, not months. So I knew that if I was going to do something meaningful with my engineering skills, I had to have a longer time horizon and learn patience. So these are some pictures of me when I had much longer hair and a beard, my time in Rwanda. So after coming back home, I started graduate school at Johns Hopkins University. I fully intended to get a PhD. As I mentioned, I was expanding my time horizon. PhDs typically take 6 years, and I thought, this would be a great way for me to sort of pay my dues and try to make a difference. So I started off doing medical robotics research. I had this idea of creating a sort of surgical drill that could tell you if you were going to penetrate a blood vessel, a major blood vessel with a drill, or in the sort of topographic, help you guide drilling into vertebra for spinal surgery. I I really enjoyed doing this. I thought it was really cool. However, I was contacted by my now boss from Avenda Health, that I'll speak to in a moment, basically with the opportunity to make meaningful impact in the short term, meaning 2 or 3 years instead of maybe a decade. And I was all about making some impact on people's lives. So that seemed like the better deal to me. So I dropped out and joined Avenda Health. You can see on the right here some pictures of my prototype drill and sort of a mock blood vessel filled with real blood, by the way. But happy to answer any questions about any of this stuff later. Let me just finish off my intro. So joined Avenda Health. It was a very small startup at the time. It was just me and one other employee in a very tiny office, about the size of my closet right now. So going from a essentially 4-person startup to 3 years later, we have 15 people, and we're planning on adding 15 more roles in the coming year. There's a lot of adversity in between those 2 points, and uncertainty. So if you guys have any questions about working for a startup in general, I'd be happy to answer any of those. But we went from having basically no software, no product at all, just some good ideas. 3 years later, we've treated 10 patients, and we're in the process of lining up 300 patients to treat in the next year. After this, I'll speak on some more about what Avenda Health is actually doing. But at this point, if any of you guys have any questions for me now, I'm happy to answer them. Any questions? I'm not looking at the video feed right now. So if you guys have any questions, speak up. Otherwise, tell me no. I'll keep going.
I can also offer some insight about what it's like to work with Avenda and under Josh.
Yeah, go for it.
So if a lot of you don't know me right now, I am Celine. Last year I was your guys' president, but this year I'm currently doing part-time school, part-time internship under Josh. So right now I'm a software engineer, and I've been doing a lot of kinds of projects, and I've had a really interesting experience working with Avenda. So currently I'm just working on a project where I'm going to be taking a look at some data for prostate MRIs, and I'll be trying to clean up the data and get it ready for an AI to take a look and start marking up all the different parts of the body, just so it's easier for us to take a look at where the cancer is, where are some parts we should avoid. I was also working on the UI for an application for a special app we're working on. And I actually got to go see a operation live of what it's like to see how our machinery and software works to help people, especially to try and remove cancer from the body. It's been really fun. I get to travel to the office every Friday, close to Hollywood, close to LA. The traffic's not the best, but we get to just work together, and I get to be with the team trying to figure out the code, as well as learning a lot about what it's like to be in the software engineering position.
Yeah, thank you, Celine. Appreciate that. Also, I'll have some more details about some of the projects that you're working on, so that your classmates can get a closer look. Well, if there's no other questions right now, I'll proceed and talk a little bit about what Avenda Health is. So Avenda Health is a prostate cancer company. And sort of the core thesis of the startup is enabling precision prostate cancer therapy. So you can see on this graphic, 1 in 8 men will develop prostate cancer in their lifetime. It's the most common solid tissue cancer in men. Prevalence rates of prostate cancer are roughly equivalent to those for breast cancer in women. So it's an extremely common cancer. However, the treatment options available for it are not very good. In fact, they're quite terrible. So right now, if you are diagnosed with prostate cancer, the average age of men diagnosed is like 65 years of age. So if you're diagnosed, your doctor will typically recommend one of two options. If you have a small amount of cancer, they will probably recommend that you do nothing because the treatment options are not great. Prostate cancer is slow growing, and the people who typically get it are elderly men. They are sort of taking a bet that they're going to choose to not treat it and hope that maybe you die of something else first. It's kind of morbid, but that's sort of the reality of the field for prostate cancer diagnosis. If you have a small amount, watch and wait, hope it doesn't become a problem. And the reason for that is the other alternative. So you have a lot of prostate cancer. The option they're going to suggest is a prostatectomy. So prostatectomy is a surgical removal of the entire prostate. So prostate is a non-essential organ. You can survive without it just fine. The challenge is in the surgical procedure itself. Removing the prostate has, as you can see here, a 50% chance of sexual or urinary dysfunction. And the reason for that is removing the prostate damages a lot of nerves. So the metaphor I typically use is, imagine the prostate is like a basketball, and the nerves are like the black stripes on a basketball. And I'm going to ask you to like surgically remove the orange without damaging any of the black stripes. It's going to be very challenging. You're probably going to cut some of them. And when those get cut, it has permanent effects on the patient. It causes like incontinence or erectile dysfunction that doesn't go away. So that's sort of the state of the field. You get diagnosed, either you do nothing or you get this surgery that'll probably get rid of your cancer, but leave you with a serious decrease in your quality of life for the remainder of your years. And the reason why it's so bad is because prostate cancer is extremely difficult to see. So I can show a picture here kind of illustrate this point. So this on the left is a small piece of a prostate MRI. So prostate cancer, MRI is a medical imaging modality that they use a lot for identifying tumors. Prostate cancer is almost invisible on it. So in this picture here, you can see the green blobs. So these are the regions that a radiologist, a doctor specializing in reading medical images, has identified as the likely locations of the prostate cancer. So the radiologist identifies the green. And this patient actually had their prostate surgically removed. And so you can see a slide of their prostate on the right. And because we surgically removed this patient's prostate, we can know where the cancer actually was, because we can take this slide like a slice of deli meat, look at it under a microscope and identify where the cancer actually was. So it's those red regions, and we can kind of see those red regions on both the MRI and this prostate deli slice. You can see that the red regions are far greater than what the radiologist thought was cancer. And this is a known problem in the field, that you can't see the full extent of cancer. And so because you can't see the full extent of the cancer, you cannot perform a precision treatment of prostate cancer. Okay? Because you don't know where it is, you have to either over-treat or not treat at all. You can't make a precise treatment. So that's what we're trying to solve at Avenda Health. So we do that with sort of a combination of two products. One we call AI cancer mapping software. So this software, the purpose is to remove this uncertainty around where prostate cancer is. So we have a deep learning algorithm that basically takes in all of a patient's diagnostic information and generates this sort of heat map you see on the left to tell urologists where they need to treat. So you can see in this graphic, this red outline is what was originally thought to be cancer. And with our heat map algorithm, they can see this yellow outline is going to be sort of the actual location of this patient's cancer. So once we have a precise mapping of where the prostate cancer is, we can go in and perform a precise treatment of the prostate cancer. So currently we've developed another product, a sort of laser therapy workstation. So this is essentially a way to perform those precision treatments for prostate cancer. You can think of it as it downloads this sort of cancer map onto the system, and then you can go in and perform corresponding treatment. So the way this sort of works is we have, you can see on the right, a needle that gets inserted into the prostate. And the tip of this needle emits a red laser light that sort of gently heats the tissue around the needle tip and causes the cells in the immediate vicinity to get sort of overheated and die. This is a great way to perform prostate cancer therapy because the treatment happens gradually, which means you can sort of monitor the patient for safety, make sure you're not going to be burning anything you shouldn't. And this is really easy for urologists to perform because what we've done is sort of piggybacked on something called prostate biopsy. So prostate biopsy is essentially where they poke the prostate with a bunch of little needles. You can see an illustration of that on the left, where each one of these little lines represents a tissue sample that was taken from the patient's prostate. So prostate biopsy is sort of the definitive way to diagnose prostate cancer. You take a bunch of samples, look at them under a microscope, and see if any of them had cancer. So doctors are already super familiar with performing prostate biopsy. For our laser therapy, we're just asking them, hey, replace your biopsy needle with our laser needle and do the same thing. So it's really easy for urologists to pick up. And we've tested this out in patients. So over the past couple of years, we did a 10-patient clinical trial at UCLA. We treated 10 patients and none of them had any loss in sexual or urinary function. As I mentioned previously, with sort of this prostatectomy, full surgical removal of the prostate, you're looking at 50% loss in sexual urinary function. So amazing on that front. As far as like cancer outcomes, 4 out of the 10 patients had all of their cancer eradicated. And for those that did not have all of their cancer eradicated, they had 90% plus of their tumor removed. So great outcomes for all of the patients, super exciting. On the left, you can kind of see an illustration of one of the patients that we treated. So in the left column, you can see their sort of pre-treatment MRI. So this blue outline is the prostate, and this sort of orange blob is sort of the visible portion of the cancer. In the middle column, you can see these 3 or 4 red lines represent biopsies that came back positive for cancer. And on the right column, you can see sort of a close-up through a microscope of what those cancerous cells look like. You can see they have a lot of these like dark purple dots. They represent sort of the bloated cell nuclei that are sort of hallmarks of cancer. And in the bottom, you can see none of the biopsies came back with cancers. They're all green, meaning no cancer. And a lot of the tissue itself is no longer has these indicators for cancer. So the pathologist who looked at this said this patient was cancer-free. So super exciting. Combination of sort of deep learning plus this laser therapy workstation, we're able to treat patients' prostate cancer without any significant side effects. Before I go into some details of Avenda Health technology, does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask about Avenda Health in general? If not, we can save them. All right. I'll take the silence as no questions so far. So next thing I'd like to do is speak a little more deeply about some of the cooler aspects of our technology that I've touched on so far. So one of the first things is this deep learning anatomical segmentation project. This is one of the things that Celine mentioned a few minutes ago that she's working on. I showed you guys some like screenshots of prostate MRI previously. So radiologists are the experts at reading prostate MRI. However, urologists are the ones that actually treat patients. They're the ones that are going to be planning the patient's cancer therapy, but they're not experts at reading prostate MRI. They'll have like a sense of what prostate MRI means, but they don't look at them in their day-to-day. They don't take extensive training or fellowships to get really good at it. So we need to help them along to make sure that they make the best possible care decisions for their patients. So one of the ways we do that is through like automated annotation of prostate MRI. So on the left, you can see sort of a blank prostate MRI that a urologist might look at. There's a lot of things going on here, lots of, it's all grayscale, first of all, and lots of sort of fuzzy contours, amorphous shapes. And if you didn't know, you might not know that this was like the picture of inside a man's abdomen. So what we do is with our expertise, we basically label out all the different like structures in the prostate MRI. For example, like the red blob here, that's part of the bladder. The green are like the femur caps that go into your pelvis. The blue is like pelvis bone. Pink here is prostate, and this teal color is the patient's rectum. So we sort of provide all these labels. We build up a data set of a lot of these labels first, and then we train a deep learning algorithm to basically recognize each of these structures so that when given a new prostate MRI, they can automatically identify each of these regions, and we can show like to the urologist, hey, here's the prostate, here's the pelvis. So they don't need to like try to think about what's going on. We'll have helped them 90% of the way. Here on this next slide, it's just sort of a 3D rendering of what I showed you on the previous slide. So once you sort of make these paint by numbers labels on the MRI, you can create a 3D volume rendering of all of the structures. So here, like the teal, or these colors don't, where'd my mouse go? I don't see my mouse anymore. Here it is. All right. So yeah, this teal, like this is the pelvis bone. This pink is the prostate, yellow is bladder. So this is super helpful because as you can see here in this picture, the prostate is sort of like encaged inside a lot of things. So it has like the pelvis bone in the front, and then it has like the rectum in the back. So when urologists are planning these surgical procedures, it's helpful to know what's going to be in the way so that they don't try to plan a surgical procedure that's not actually possible because there's bone in the way or something like that. So that's kind of where these tools come in. And, it's a combined effort of a lot of data, like on this scale of like thousands of labeled prostate MRI, plus some deep learning algorithms to enable, automatic labeling of all these structures. Cool. So that's sort of just for bulk anatomy, like, the prostate, the pelvis. You also have a more sort of focused algorithm for predicting the true extent of prostate cancer. So as I mentioned previously, radiologists, which are supposed to be the expert at reading prostate MRI, they get the answer wrong almost all of the time on where the tumor is and where it isn't. So in this picture, this is a real patient. The radiologist thought the cancer was orange. The cancer actually was this purple thing, which overlaps with the orange, but has a very like significant extension beyond the orange. And you can see in blue is sort of the output of our algorithm. So you can see our algorithm gets, basically the entire tumor. So if you treat what we tell you to, the whole tumor will go away. Next slide. So this is kind of funny. So as you might imagine, we're not the first people to think about treating just part of the prostate, right? Because as I mentioned previously, you have an option of either doing nothing or treat the whole prostate, but your cancer can be of any size. So sometimes it doesn't make any logical sense to take out the entire organ when there's just a little bit of cancer. The problem is the urological community's answer to this problem was, if you see cancer on just the left side of the prostate, treat the whole left side. You see cancer on just the right side, treat the whole right side. Only problem with that is cancer doesn't care what side of the prostate it's on. It could have like a large piece on the left side and a little like finger that reaches all the way to the other side of the prostate. So just taking this like left half or right half approach isn't that great. It only gets rid of your cancer like half the time. It's not that great. Our algorithm does a lot better. We tested it on a data set of 50 patients, and our algorithm would get rid of all of the cancer 80% of the time. So going from 50% to 80% is like a huge boost. I mean, as I mentioned before, our laser therapy, none of the patients had any of these major side effects. So if you have like a 5 in 10 or 8 in 10 chance of getting rid of all of your cancer for no side effects, it's like who wouldn't choose that when the alternatives are so bad. So yeah, I will keep going. Sort of the last significant piece or interesting piece of Avenda Health technology I'm going to talk about is our WebGL shader-based tissue damage model. So this is on our laser therapy system. I mentioned previously that we perform sort of a gentle heating with a red laser that gently heats the tissue up and causes cell death. So this is like a screenshot of the UI from that software. So I'll kind of give some brief introduction to what's going on here. And sort of this sort of like pale gray outline. So this is the prostate 3D model of the patient's prostate. This green wireframe mesh, this represents like a planned treatment. And you can see this like blue to orange background is like a 3D heat map that we're generating of the patient's prostate. So this allows doctors, while they're treating the patient, to be able to kind of rotate the 3D model, look around and see in real time what parts of the prostate are getting hot, which are like staying cool, so they can make sure they don't cause collateral damage to nearby tissue, nearby organs. And then on the right, can see like this little orange ball forming, sort of an alternative view. So the left is showing temperature in real time, and the right side is displaying the cells that have already died. So you can do this, I mentioned it here on this side, by using something called the Arrhenius equation. If you got any of you guys took like biology classes, the Arrhenius equation is a way to basically tell if a cell would have died based on the thermal dose it has received. So basically what that means is it's a way of telling, if you expose like a cell to like a really hot temperature, that it's only going to take a small amount of time to die. Whereas if you like expose it to like a hot, like too hot for life, but not that hot, that'll take like a slower amount of time to die. We can use this equation. It's kind of like an integral of the temperature data to give an accurate estimate of what parts of the prostate have actually been treated and what hasn't. We can kind of see another view of that on the right. This doctor has performed 2 burns, and so these orange regions are expected to have died, so that you kind of get your precision cancer map from that deep learning algorithm I mentioned previously. You import it onto this device, you actually perform the treatment, and then you can compare like these orange balls to the cancer map, and you'll be able to know if you actually got all the cancer. So all of this works basically through a shader running in Google Chrome, written in GLSL and WebGL. So it's kind of interesting because the way we're acquiring temperature data during these prostate cancer treatments is with sort of a single temperature sensing needle. So it's basically sampling temperature in like a vector. And then we did a bunch of sort of experiments burning a bunch of steak with a laser, basically burning the steak with like the laser at different laser powers and different like laser activation times. And then we cut the steak in half and see like how much steak had gotten cooked. And so you collect all those data points of how laser power and laser activation time influences the size of the steak burn. You can come up with a model of, if you know how long you're burning for and the temperatures, you can predict sort of the shape of the tissue damage. So that's how we're sort of generating these orange blobs. So lots of benchtop experiments that then gets turned into, WebGL code. All right, so that's kind of a sort of intro to sort of the quirky aspects of Avenda Health's technology. So some closing thoughts in general, like this is sort of pretty typical kind of work from a like med tech or life science startup. There's a lot of these sort of scientific aspects. You build up a lot of domain knowledge. So if you're interested in like working in the space, either like an intern or full time, I cannot emphasize enough, you should apply to the Bioscience LA BioFutures internship program. I know a lot of companies in the space like to hire software engineering interns in particular through this program. And there's not enough people applying to it. I think it's because they don't know it exists. Also, like if you're interested in potentially interning for Avenda Health specifically, apply to that program and then email me. So I know like basically when or who to look for in the applicant pool. Some more specifics on that. We're interested in candidates with 3D graphic skills, as you might imagine, with OpenGL, WebGL, GLSL shaders, or if you have a lot of experience with stuff like Unity, that's good too. Front-end JavaScript, React is always an awesome skill to have, but anything equivalent is great. And also really interested in students with experience writing code for like mesh interactions. Like if you are ever worked on like your own game engine, you'd probably delve into things like octrees or other ways to do these high performance mesh to mesh interactions. So experience like that is awesome. Yeah, I know it's like a lot of like domain knowledge or something maybe you haven't thought about before. Most men in particular don't really think about their prostate until you're of age of prostate cancer. So thank you for bearing with me on this very specific topic, but happy to answer any questions you guys might have now about Avenda Health, working for a startup, anything you might want to ask someone working in the field.
So does anyone have any questions for me or Josh at the moment?
Yeah. What's your question, Solomon? Okay, the question is, when you're testing the medical drill, whose blood do you use?
Yeah, great question. This is a very, it's kind of funny. So a lot of hospitals, like research hospitals, when you get admitted, you have like consent forms, right? Which speak to basically what the hospital can do with your data or, things like your blood. So at Johns Hopkins Hospital, since it's primarily an academic research hospital, patients go in, like your blood, if you sign the consent forms, your blood can be used for any research purpose that the hospital agrees to. So it's basically patients at Johns Hopkins Hospital who signed those forms. They were anonymized, but it was their blood. So it wasn't my blood. Grad school takes enough out of you. They don't need your literal blood too.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, there's another one. So the question is, what was it like at first being in a startup?
Yeah, great question. So it's one of those things like where expectation meets reality. So I'd always liked the idea of working for a startup. But I think the biggest sort of mismatch between expectation and reality was like how fast things would go, right? Because maybe you guys would agree, there's this perception of startups where it's like go, 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 go. And people are like coding furiously like all day and all night. That's not always reality. I've never known anyone who worked at a company like that. I think it's like basically the ball moves as fast as you push it. So it's like I would at first, when I first joined, the first couple of years, I worked like a lot just because we had nothing and I wanted to see it actually be a thing. But then sort of like as you add more team members and you have to be more careful because it's not just about building things, it's making sure you haven't broken what you've already built. The pace tends to slow down a bit and become more sustainable. I think some of the maybe like downsides of working for a startup is there's uncertainty, right? Like you could just not get that next round of funding and then the company has to close its doors, which is not great. Also, a lot of your compensation is tied up in like company equity, which may or may not be worth anything ever. Usually not worth anything. So that's like one of those balancing acts you have to make. Do I go work for a big company that can give me sort of a more stability, more cash compensation, or do I go work for the startup that has like no stability? Their equity is probably not going to be worth anything, and I'm going to have to work like crazy at first. One of our company advisors, he says people who work for startup need to have useful delusion. It's a term he uses because it doesn't make sense on paper why you would do this. So it really does have to be like one of those things where like you really believe that like the world would be a better place with your product versus without. So for me personally, I would love to, like, if Avenda, succeeds or fails, I would have no problem working for another startup. It would just have to be something I really cared about, because I would not go through this hectic journey for something that I felt was just like vaporware or like not very useful.
All right, thank you. Anyone have any other questions? All right, one.
So, were there any group projects during your intern for the startup?
So were there any group projects for your startup?
Yeah, good question. So group projects, I mean, in some sense, like everything's a group project because like we're all working on like the same products. But typically we like to carve out like a space for an individual so that, for interns, like don't want to be giving interns projects that are like due next week, right? Because that'd be very stressful. So like there is like, it'll be part of the product, but like usually like its own like silo. That being said, as far as like the way the internships goes, like you like pair up with a mentor who's there to like help you. So like you're not alone, but is at the end of the day, you have to deliver results by yourself.
Yeah, I could probably vouch for that. I'm the newest intern right now, and I was paired with Josh and one other engineer at the company. And it's not just me figuring stuff out on my own. There's some times where I do have to like research some things on my own, try to work by myself. but it's a lot of pair programming. And when I do come into the office, really like sit down and like start writing on the board all of the code that I'm trying to work through and like different methods I want to try to get projects done. And I like that a lot because like other places and other projects I've done where it's me just programming on my own, researching on my own, it doesn't feel as productive compared to like when I'm actually guided by Josh and my other mentor.
All right, thank you. I see there's one question in the chat, but just want to let everyone know it's almost 12:50. So if you have to go to class, please feel free to leave. Only thing after this is just some announcements about what we're doing next week. But yeah, there are two questions in the chat if you can see them.
Yeah, I can speak to them. So the first question is, can I still apply even though I may not have those particular skills? Sort of general advice is don't be the person who says no to yourself. If you think you have, what it takes, like apply and let the person on the other side of the table make the decision. Don't exclude yourself from opportunities because you're not sure if you're a great fit. So I would say like, yes, apply anyway. The other question, what is the significance of Bumblebee Guy? This is a funny question. So it's a Simpsons character. Simpsons isn't as popular these days, but when you're making these screenshots, like you should never use real patient information. So we just have like a stock list of like fictional characters. So Bumblebee Guy is the one that made it into this screenshot.
Yeah, when I was going through training and I was being showed all the software, I'm like, are these actual patients? And then I start recognizing, wait, these are the presidents of the US. And I felt so confused, like, oh, it's just examples to use.
Okay, so
then,
a funny sorry, Celine, to illustrate this, previously we used like Homer Simpson or something like that. And the FDA actually dinged us on it. So like, make sure you're not using like a, real person. I'm like, really? Like, you guys don't recognize Homer Simpson? Like, what is this generational gap going on? Like, so we've used even more like obvious fake names since then.
And then like for the internship question, I thought I didn't have these skills that would apply to the job. And I actually applied, I didn't apply to an internship position. I applied to a software engineering position that I thought would start in summer. And I apparently was supposed to be hired immediately for a software engineering position. But instead I said, like, I'd rather have an internship to learn and to grow. And I'm glad I did, because I'd rather not just be thrown in and start struggling. So don't be afraid to apply, just try. You don't know what's gonna happen. And it would be cool to work with people from school.
Thank you for answering those questions. I don't think there's any more questions here in the room, and everyone has to get to class. So thank you very much, Josh and Celine, for coming out to talk to us about Avenda Health. It was really informative.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Thank you so much. If we have time,
I'll hop off then.
thank you. I just have announcements. I'm sorry. Next meeting, we're going to go over club elections. So if you want to get more involved, you can come to that meeting and we'll talk to you about it. And we're also doing team check-ins next week. So be prepared to talk about the progress you've made in your teams. And this week we're holding a game night. The next week on Friday, we're going to hold a workshop on how to make your GitHub more presentable. And like always, club shirts are $20 and they come with a membership. All right. Thank you. All right, that was all my announcements. Thank you for coming. Oh, actually.
If you guys do have more questions about internships, working in startup, I am in the Discord for the club. Celine is confused again, because I am always confused with what's going on with the e-board.
Yeah, or you could ask any of the board members and we'll direct you to the right place. So with that, the meeting is over. Thank you everyone for coming.
Be safe, y'all.
Thanks, Celine. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.